Hi, my name is John Dickinson. I'm a Chief Commercial Officer at Equal Experts, and this evening we are back again with Expert Talks. But tonight we've got something a little bit different. So this evening, Carlos and Nuno from our Portugal office, and we're actually in Portugal, we've been pioneering, remote working for a number of years. And they're going to talk about going remote, but they're going to take a slightly different perspective. So this evening they'll be doing a role play approach on how a couple of different people are adapting to the new norm and new ways of working, and also sharing tips and techniques as they go through that. So with that, I will actually, just before they start, please, if you have questions that you want to ask, drop them in the Q&A, the Q&A box, and then we'll be answering questions at the end. If you're not familiar, the Q&A box is at the bottom of the screen. It's got the two speech bubbles with Q&A underneath it. Okay, and that is it from me. I'll hand over to Carlos and Nuno. Thank you very much.
Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Hello, Nuno. Haven't seen you in a long time, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. It's nice to see you too, mate.
So yesterday it was declared a state of emergency here in Portugal. How are you dealing with it and with the rest of this COVID pandemic situation?
Not too bad. So my family is all healthy and all the measurements to contain the virus haven't impacted us that much so far. So how are things with your travel agency? How are you dealing with all of this, mate?
Well, there has been some hardships, as you know, but currently that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. I know you always worked in a remotely or remote-friendly software company, and I wanted to exchange some doubts with you.
Okay, go for it. How can I help?
So I need to adapt my company to work remotely in an efficient way because now people are forced to work from home, and I know that people are a bit lost. And since you've done this, do you have any advice to give me?
Okay, first thing I think you need to have in mind is that we cannot consider this remote work business as usual. Okay, now everybody should really be remote. Some less optimal situations are expected to happen, and people shouldn't really feel bad about it. So imagine Wi-Fi gets patchy, so who hasn't faced this problem? You just start by burr, 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 and it doesn't move.
Oh, to me, it constantly happens to speak while muted. I imagine this happened to you, right?
And yeah, of course, unless you are very used to it or disciplined, it gets better with time. And if you try it, it's easy to forget to unmute yourself when you want to step into a conversation. Imagine the kids at school. I can see through the example of my daughter that the kids are screaming all the time. They forget to mute when they're doing their video classes. And there's an important part with this is that in this moment, we have our families at home and they need our attention too, especially children. It's hard for them to understand everything that we're passing, that we're facing, and we have to give support to older people in a lot of cases. So it's important to be aware of that. And a lot of people are not that used, I don't know in the travel agency, but a lot of people are not used to this reality, not the COVID one, but even so digital and working from home. So it's important to give time, and a lot of people have to adapt to working like this. It takes time to train the business as usual remote. Imagine this non-COVID way.
Okay, you just said that this is not business as usual. So let me ask the question in a different way. So what are the most common types of remote work that people can have in, let's say, more regular environment, not nowadays?
Okay, so first of all, working remotely can be a blessing and a curse at the same time. So let me give you a bit of context on the different approaches. There's this single site team where everyone is co-located and some people work from home, but they still have the same office, the physical location. There's the multi-site, where you have 2 or more co-located groups in separate locations, but are mainly larger teams with formal sub-team boundaries and responsibilities. Then you have satellite workers. It occurs when you have most of the team co-located, and then you have one person here and there working in different countries or cities. And the thing that is growing is the remote first team, where everyone works on a separate location, usually from home, but the main focus of communication occurs online.
Well, as I said before, my teams are having a bit of difficulties in adapting to this new remote work situation. How can I help them? Do you know of any specific training that they can have, or any kind of tools or tricks that I can help them with?
Okay, there's a couple of tricks that we have been doing for quite some time. So virtual lunch meetings is one of them. Not allowed to talk about work. The same thing with remote coffee breaks to have the same feeling as the coffee machine conversation. You can embed 5-minute icebreakers into your meetings. Just ask a question and everybody answers, and it's not work related, so it will help break the ice. You can make exercise together, so come up with challenges to motivate groups. Everybody likes to be competing with each other. This gamification works really well, especially for shorter periods. You can have yoga, meditation. There's a lot of companies doing a lot of things nowadays. So a lot of business, not only yours, it's transforming to remote to adapt. And let me tell you an interesting story that one of my colleagues told me. So a friend of hers works in another remote first team, and they were still missing the office co-working days that they had. So they still had an office. So they allocated some percentage of their time, around 20%, to build a virtual office in Minecraft. Now they can virtually bump into each other for daily coffees, can see if there is anyone in the office, and it's quite a similar way that they have set it up, like a custom Sococo. I don't know if you know the tool, Carlos.
Yeah.
But another example is that you can do is just have what we call an office window, like a Zoom call or a Hangouts that is constantly open. And if you're feeling lonely, you can jump in and check if someone for you to talk a bit.
Okay, but in a way, all this that you talk about now could be included in the ways of working of the team, right?
Well, yes. Independently, if you are co-located or distributed, agreeing on goals, practices, process, tools, meetings, and members. So having a shared vision and norms help set expectations for how your team will work together.
Well, but this might be a bit difficult with people in different locations and with different backgrounds. Don't you agree?
Well, cultural differences should be addressed in the ways of working, especially with distributed teams. So it's important to be open-minded and don't be afraid to accommodate these differences. Be an effective communicator, essentially. Use universal language. So it's better to verify that this can be done. Adjust the speed of your speech to suit the audience. Imagine if we're in a company that the main language is English. Some people might not have the same proficiency in English. And make sure, double check that what you mentioned has been properly understood.
Okay. Do you have any example of ways of working that apply directly to remote teams?
Well, I can show you this example. So there's a couple of good examples, companies like 47 Signals, WordPress, Hotjar, that have been doing this for a long time. And that was their genesis. So they have a lot of information online, and then they have the machine ready for remote work. They do have some info on a bit of ways of working, global one, not team one, but it's important to make them visible and transparent to everyone inside the company, at least, even if you don't publish it online to the whole world.
But if we have everyone working the same way, this will add constraints, and this won't also allow people to experiment and improve and adapt their own practices, right?
Well, what I would suggest is centralize infrequent high impact issues and decentralized urgent or locally relevant decision making. So that way you create autonomy, and what you should try to aim is work on the strategic portfolio level to make the workflow work and let the rest to allow for the teams to be independent and work on it.
Okay, we've been talking a lot about practices. Is there any particular set of tools that can help with this?
Well, Carlos, it's not the tools that are important, but what you do with them and how they adapt to your needs. So fortunately nowadays, tools are poof, poof, appearing every day. So finding the best tools should be part of the experimentation / exploration part of each team when improving continuously.
Okay. Some teams in my company like to use pair programming. Do you know of any tools that can help with that?
Well, a lot of people you can use Slack or Zoom if you already use it, or any general purpose screen sharing tool, but they become harder on the pairing when you want to share control. So there's Tuple.app has an example. It was designed specifically for remote pair programming. It's far superior than the others, but it comes with a significant price.
Okay. I just remembered a tool that might also be helpful for pair programming remotely, which is the keyboard visualization tool, because this will allow people remotely to see the shortcuts and key combinations that other people are using. People working from home, I think they will have a bit more of distractions, like you said before, with their kids, or even with, let's say, the will to go outside and go to the coffee shop or something like that. Is this a valid perception?
In fact, in a non-COVID situation, working from home typically leads to less distractions. Imagine you have less office politics, a quieter noise level, less or more efficient meetings. At least that's what I expected. The ability to dress more casually and comfortably, although fortunately a lot of companies are opening up to this particular case in their offices. And a more personalized office environment if you have the space for it. And let me give you an example. A couple of days ago, Twitter announced that their employees are allowed to work from home forever. But there are more and more companies moving into this remote first reality. So Coinbase, Facebook, Shopify, Square. I'll send you a link where you can check a lot of them on office status. And the main thing, Carlos, is that you shouldn't care where they work from, as long as you feel comfortable and are able to do your job properly.
But be honest with me, all that you've talked about is positive things. There are some downsides with remote work. I can imagine one right away, like isolation. Do you have any advice regarding this and to minimize these downsides?
You know, I'm always honest with you, so come on. Yeah, so social isolation can happen, especially in these moments where we shouldn't get out that much, or we shouldn't get out at all. So video, it's something that can reduce the social distance, not only with your colleagues, your family, and your friends.
But isn't it too exhausting to spend the entire day in video calls?
Yeah, it's true. That is true. So video calls mean we need to work harder to process nonverbal cues like facial expressions, the tone and pitch of the voice, and our own body language, which in this case you basically see my head. So paying more attention to that consumes more energy from us. So it's natural that people are fatigued due to video calls, to excess of video calls. So, and another interesting point around video, Carlos, that probably you weren't aware. So the working remote, it can create fresh challenges for employees. So people can be unintentionally engaged in behaviors that could be considered to a point as bullying, or make insensitive remarks that one could find offensive. So this can lead to some frictions in the team and can impact productivity. So to avoid this, organizations should establish norms and systems to help those who may feel uncomfortable or to some point threatened. And the main point, and getting back to the video fatigue, is that we need nowadays is to try to disconnect from work. So personal tip is, if you have that possibility, just to have a separate space at home that you can try to close or avoid going there, like a home office. If not possible, have at least 2 laptops and close and hide the one from work when the day finishes. If not, try to find some strategy to help you disconnect.
But if people disconnect too much from work, they might end up at a coffee shop or at the park. How can I really know if they're working or what are they working on?
Okay, that sounds a bit like control, and there's no need to control. So there is a perception that if you can physically see someone sitting at their desk doing work, then they are getting anything done. So doing nothing has nothing to do with remote.
So let me rephrase my question. How can I know at what time they are working?
Okay, so using a team calendar to keep track of what are the team holidays, meeting compromises, and so on, and people can establish their working time and block the calendar for that according to their time zones. And on that side, it's very important that you help your teams, Carlos, to set strict working hours, as again, going back to the disconnect, just as you would if you would be in the office. So the work-life blend, but still with separation in this part, is still very possible.
So what you're saying is that always available and remote workers being slackers are just two myths, right?
Yes.
How do you think this kind of myth affects the company culture as a whole?
Well, it's true that there are no interactions in the kitchen or casual hallways, stop and chats on remote teams. So as I mentioned to you, social moments can and should be baked into the remote dynamic. So people should also have periodic FaceTimes to improve their relationships, although in this moment that we're facing, not advised. But as I told you, you don't need to control anyone. You just need to enable the system for this to happen.
In this situation that we cannot, let's say, be face-to-face with people all the time, trusting people becomes harder. Do you have any advices in how to build trust in this kind of remote setting?
Well, make sure you listen as much as you talk. So especially when the main core of your communication is online, it's better to over communicate than the other way around. So make sure that you communicate in the channels where everyone that should read your message is in there. And going back a bit to the not control and trust part, the main point is to make work visible. So there's a big number of tools nowadays to make work visible. That way you build trust by what is delivered. And you give people autonomy. That's what you hire them for, right, Carlos?
Yeah, you're right. But in order for people to have autonomy, I think the communication process in my company needs to improve a lot. Do you have any experience on optimizing this process?
Well, apart from the over-communicate that I mentioned, is that you should over-communicate what are the goals. So if there's not a common understanding of the goals, all other communications will be lost or will give rise to several misunderstandings. So use this as the single source of truth by making it transparent, and have open conversations. And it's important that you bear in mind that not everyone will agree on something that you'll push for. So in order to foster autonomy, instead of nagging people, imagine that tap in the back that you would give in the office 20 times to push people to probably do it quicker. Mention them on a Trello or a Jira card. Has an example of 2 platforms that you can add cards, and this will allow people to get back to you when they have time or have a clear history of the developments in the card they belong to, but still keeping their focus, which is very important to get work done.
I just remembered that the other day I was having a phone call with a friend of mine, and it was really, really noisy, and I couldn't hear a word he was saying. Do you know of any ways we can prevent this from happening with remote teams?
Yeah, don't avoid doing calls from noisy places or places with low bandwidth. So another thing that you can use, so if you can find a space isolated, although don't forget that nowadays all the families at home, so just depends on how much space and how many people you have at home. But apart from that, if you use a good headset, especially with a microphone with noise canceling like this, can help a lot. And as you mentioned, you forget a lot of times to mute your microphones, but that's a technique that you should try to embrace to help out on the noise level.
There is one thing that still bothers me a bit when it comes to remote work, which is how do we manage to work with people in different time zones? Do you have any experience with this in your company?
Yes, we still have that. So it's, as I mentioned, agree on working hours, especially with different time zones. This is key. And you have to embrace the communication across distributed time zone working schedules. So I believe that planning ahead, so no decisions at the 11th hour, it's still agile if you work that way. It may seem like a bit of extra work, but it's actually more organized. And if you give autonomy to these people, this won't come bite you in the head because you've trained them to be accountable and be autonomous to make their own decisions.
What it looks to me is that communication is the most important thing when it comes to remote work. So in this kind of environment, how can we handle difficult meetings? Imagining, let's say, a retro.
Okay, so Esther Derby, who wrote the big retrospective book, wrote an article that I bumped on that mentioned the 8 principles for remote retrospectives. But Carlos, basically for me, I would say it's the 8 principles for remote meetings. Let me walk you through them. So it's very important that you design to equalize participation. Imagine if you set up a game, just an icebreaker, and you have to make it playable to the same way to everyone. So it's important that you have that in mind when designing the activity. Structure. So I would suggest, with everything that you put on a calendar, that you send structure ahead of time. So just a simple agenda, the goals of the meeting, it will help for people to come with that mindset and that focus to the session. You can replace visual cues because it's harder on video, much harder on the phone. You can use a set of cards. There's a lot of people using it, or a post-it. I have here a couple of them, but there's a lot of them. These are the collaboration superpower cards, Carlos. It's free to download, but you can create your own. Just be creative. Okay. Or use your fingers.
Yeah, this is quite interesting. How do you know that people are there? Is there any ways to do this?
Yeah, so do like a sound check. So help people remember who is there. So when someone joins online, just say, hi, Mike, how are you? And you're hoping for him to come back to you. So you do sound check that he's getting the sound, you're getting the sound back, and you remind the people on the meeting that Mike just joined. And in this point, some people disconnect, like you would do on an office, on a meeting room. But here, probably in some cases, you might have other distractions, and well, you only see people's heads. So in this case, try to engage and push people into the discussion. So if you're seeing that someone is silent for a long time, try mentioning his name and pushing him back into the discussion. And it's very important for you to know your tool. So it's important to do a dry run, especially if you're using the tool for the first time. So stress test the tool a couple of times if you can, and use more than one if needed, but try to simplify if you can.
Well, but as you know, sometimes the tools don't work properly in live environment, right?
Yeah, we all know what happens. So yeah, it's a good tip to use a back channel. So have something that if by any means that platform, website, whatever is down, that you can set up very quickly or have already prepared something else for the team to use in the time they have together. But Carlos, don't let tools dictate your format, okay? So as I mentioned before, it's not about the tools as you asked, there's a lot of them nowadays. It's just think about what you need to do and then try to pick up the tools that will help you deliver the best.
Let me tell you that even in these difficult times, my company is still growing.
Good.
So this means that I need to continue to hire new people. Is there any particular kind or type of people or people with, let's say, a specific set of skills that I should search for?
Okay, contrary to what people might think, and especially if you're moving towards a remote situation, people will need a lot of discipline, especially around communication. Okay, and then you have to foster practice with all these remote practices that we're talking about. And one point to you is that it's really important to treat everyone as grown-ups. That's the kind of attitude you should ask for from any of your workers, and not anything below that. You know, so if you treat people like children, they will behave as one. Even if you treat children like babies, they will behave like one. So it's a bit on your hands to foster this kind of culture. And especially and foremost, you should aim for mature, not in terms of age, okay? But if you can find people that are used to work in a remote environment, it will help you out. And if they are responsible, that you feel you can trust them and make them accountable.
But does this mean that I should avoid junior developers?
No. That's not what I'm saying. Calm down. So you should hire junior developers or people that just got out of college, if that's the case. People have to start somewhere, right? It's important that you are aware that they need more coaching and training in these practices. So if possible, when all of this starts to calm down or disappears, co-located might be better as a starting point. And it's always good to have a blend of both along the way. So in this case, imagine for junior people, it's very important to talk about onboarding process. So the onboarding process will help new people, both them being considered whatever the label is for senior or junior, to get up to speed with a company with no time. So the team norms or team charter, whatever you want to call it, as I mentioned to you before, can be used as a team onboarding process. And some companies use the concept of buddies to help on this. And you can use like just a simple tool like a Trello to onboard people. One important thing, and Carlos, I know we're on a pandemic, but introducing co-location and FaceTime whenever possible, at least at the beginning of the project, it's really important. This will help for sure new people in the teams. Because with the face-to-face, with the lack of it, we make assumptions on how people behave. So if we tend to avoid video and use a lot of Slack or some text message service and email, a lot of the written communication can be misunderstood.
Oh, but nowadays, due to the virus, FaceTime is pretty much impossible, or at least not encouraged. How can we really move forward without it?
Okay, so keep the camera on and use video as much as you can. So when people are seeing faces, they feel more comfortable with each other. Again, it's important to mute and unmute your microphone. Keep your phones face down so that you try to focus. If needed, close other applications and or notifications, and ensure that you're clearly visible on the video screen, just for the sake of light, that you don't look that you're on the dark side. That way you can try to have eye contact with the people on the other side, and that will for sure help and improve communication.
With all this information that we've been talking about, I think I'm really well prepared to help my teams work remotely in a better way than they have so far. Do you have any more tips you want to share besides the ones we've already spoken so far?
Oh, there's a particular one that gets me mad. So it's really important to use a proper avatar, especially in a global team platform with dozens of people, and have your name and role clear for everyone inside and outside your company to know who are you interacting. So in this case, you can interact with someone from another team that you have never seen. So just again, in the video, seeing someone's face instead of Bart Simpson will create a bit more of communication and humanity. Another thing that it's really important, and it is fundamental, is that especially when you go remote, and despite having some limitations, it's to do one-on-ones. If you don't do it, Carlos, it's important for you to do. But here you have to create a shorter cadence of them.
Okay, but if we do too much one-on-ones, let's put it like this, doesn't this create the transparency problems with other people in the team?
Well, that's not the goal of one-on-ones. The kind of information that you should pass to the whole company or team, it's not the ones that should be mentioned on a one-on-one. But apart from that, it's important to keep information accessible for everyone. So you can log side chat decisions, record video meetings, take notes, and share it on public spaces. Just some bullet points about what happened. Also, don't share information with just one person with the team if that information should be shared with the whole group, so that everyone feels empowered to change and comment what happened.
As I said before, I'm now very confident that this remote work experience in my company will work. But going back to hiring new people, since people are now basically working remotely, probably there are some kind of perks that I should include in the job offer, no?
Yeah, but a very important one, non-pandemic, is the work-life not balance, and this is really important. It's the blend or integration that you should aim for. So this means we only have one life, not two separate ones, and your work, my work, should be as interesting as our lives. So the flexible schedule, it's something that you can push as a perk, as long as it suits the time that best suits the team and the company you work with. So that's a thing that you should establish with the person. No commuting. So I know how much, and I'll be very ironic, people like to be in the tube being squeezed like sardine in a can. And the commuting causes a lot of stress, and stress leads, it's basically one of the biggest causes of diseases. So this is a thing that there are a lot of people that spend 2 to 3 hours on the subway or traffic or trains per day. So that will lead to time saving. So imagine having more time to spend with your family, or to start one, more time for physical activity. You should aim for extra sleeping time and work where you feel more comfortable, as long as you have the conditions to do it. And mainly, working from home can lead to better health in a variety of ways. So the ability for you to eat healthier, for you to recover from a illness, and less exposure to illness too. In this case, could be cold or a flu, or even COVID. And the option to create a comfortable and ergonomic space if you have the proper conditions to do so. And Carlos, have you read the news? Have you seen the impact of people staying at home? The impact on pollution? Imagine, even if we don't get to that extreme point, the reduction that could be possible after the lockdown ends. how much healthier would we all be?
All in all, isn't most of what we've been talking so far just following common sense?
In hindsight, basically everything we said, it's the same as you would, should do in an office. So it comes down to common sense. But Carlos, still that is one of the questions of the century, is what is common sense? But that would give a bigger conversation per se. So let me give you an example and how you can lead by example. And this touches soft point on my heart from the Canada government. They sent to the government employees a couple of notes, so that you are not working from home. You are at home during a crisis trying to work. Your personal, physical, mental, and emotional health is far more important than anything right now. You should not try to compensate for lost productivity by working longer hours. You will be kind to yourself and not judge how you are coping based on how you see others coping. And you will be kind to others and not judge how they're coping based on how you are coping. And to finish, your team success will not be measured the same way as it was if things were normal. This is really important in leadership. And Carlos, before you go, I know that you got to run. Just wanted to ask you something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you know who led the digital transformation in your company?
Well, I'd say that it was myself, right?
Because you're the CEO, right?
And because I'm having this conversation too.
No. It was COVID.
Okay, so this chat has been really, really good to me, but I really have to go now. I'll continue with this remote work adventure, and please let's keep in touch.
Yep. Carlos, come back to me and tell me how are things going. Let's keep in touch. Take care and stay safe.
Okay, so thank you everyone who took their time to listen to us.
Yeah, just before we go, some inspiration for this talk, apart from our personal experience and some blogs, and especially our day-to-day work at Equal Experts with the different clients we have worked with. These are some of the books that we've read around remote and its practices to help us out.
Well, and between the two of us, we've been working in the past 4 years for companies that work remotely for companies in a lot of different countries, from the United States, Canada, Brazil, United Kingdom, Switzerland, Germany, Poland, Romania, and Portugal too, at least our home country. So this has been it.
Equal Experts has some playbooks that you can get for free to download. For the sake of the topic of our talk today, we'll give a highlight on the remote working one, which is a work in progress. So it's being kept, it's being updated. So you can use it as not a book that you print, but something that it evolves along the way.
Also, my name is Carlos. I've been a software engineer for Equal Experts for the last 4 years.
And I'm Nuno Pereira. I have been for the last 4 years too, delivery lead at Equal Experts Portugal.
Okay, so please don't forget, stay safe and stay home as much as you can.
And now let's go for some Q&A. Thank you very much.
All right, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Nuno. Thank you, Carlos. I have been locked out of my machine somehow, so I've joined on my phone, and thankfully it's working. Normally at this point, what I would do is I would read through the questions, because I know there's a couple that have come up in the Q&A panel. Can you see those? Because they're not coming up on my phone.
Okay, so we have two. One of them is any tips for people with kids at home? Someone said duct tape in a garage. Okay, pretty violent. Okay. Well, I can say my experience, okay, but my daughter is 10. So she sometimes likes to appear on camera, so it's normal. I usually warn people. In this case, I asked her specifically not to show up. But in the normal day, she sometimes shows up. So I usually tell people that might happen and try to act as naturally as possible. So kids with different ages, so she can be a bit autonomous in her homeschooling, which helps. With smaller kids, good luck. To be honest, I don't know. It's very hard. It just depends on the child itself, especially if they're more than one. I haven't passed through that experience.
So we have a different question, which is from Helen Hill. I find email conversations can get very long with different people being added and lost in the replies. A call, Hangout, Zoom often resolves the matter, but this is not always convenient with everybody's busy diaries. Any advice? Also, have you tried using something like Slack? Because if you don't need the response right away, a tool, say an asynchronous tool might help. Do you have any suggestion, Nuno?
Well, if you're a visual person, as you mentioned, just sketching and sharing the sketch for people to add notes using virtual boards like Miro, Mural, and there's a couple of them, Milanote, can help out because I'm a visual person too, Helen. So I feel your pain. So what I usually do is I draw, take a pic, share it, let people add notes. Slack or Microsoft Teams or whatever helps a lot, but try to experiment with something more visual like a Miro board.
We have another question from Calvin. What advice do you have for someone that starts a new job remotely? I think one of the things that Nuno pointed out, which is try to separate your working life from your, let's say, personal life, like following and trying to follow the same routines as you did when you were going to the office, like please dress, please do the same, go to your, I don't know if you have an office or something like that, please do this kind of routines, and this will help a lot when you are starting a new job remotely. And if, as I was saying, if possible, if you have a different space at home to work than for the rest of the, let's say, your normal life, I would say use it. And also when the work is done, just close your computer and leave it be there.
Yeah, I would add over communicate as mentioned, and make your work visible. So the transparency of what you're doing will help a lot, especially if you're starting a remote work. Okay, so we have another one from Sabira. What about using microphones, code share tools?
Well, I think he's probably talking about Visual Studio Code. There's a part of live sharing. Honestly, I haven't really tried it out, but there are some coworkers of ours like Vitor Castro who's been talking to me a lot about it, but honestly, I haven't tried it, but I trust his judgment. So if he says that he's worked day-to-day with pair programming remotely like this, so probably I'll say that this would work too.
Yeah, it was one of the icons that we added on the slide actually, but we haven't had any detailed experience with it, at least both of us. It works relatively well. Cool, so that's a tool for us to experiment, and thanks for your feedback, Sabira. So John, for the moment, that's about it.
Excellent. Are there, just the last call out, are there any more questions from the audience before we close off?
Okay, we have here, many environments have managers with the view work from home equals slacking. How do you manage forced remote working when management levels not bullying in fully?
Or buying in fully.
Bully.
Buying in. Like if the management is not convinced of it, yeah. Well, honestly, at this time, during this COVID pandemic, people don't have a choice, right? So they are forced to do it. Well, I think what you could do is try to show, and this will be shown in a way that this will work, and this will be, people will be productive anyway, being from home or being from the office or whatever. We had this kind of thing about how do I control my employees? We had a question about this. And I think all the answers there sort of tied up to this. Do you want to add anything, Nuno?
Yeah, we faced, to be honest, we faced that situation too with some clients. But if you show the value of what you are delivering, well, we hope, fingers crossed, that people understand that this doesn't make a big difference in what you can do. And I hope we helped on that. We have another one from Neil. I think lazy people are lazy at work or in the office. +1, Neil. Couldn't agree more. Now, actually, I had a situation, so I cannot give a lot of details, but I worked in a company where a big part of a department, another one, couldn't go out before 7:38 when the director that seated next to them went out, just because he just bullied them. But I can tell you that most of them after 5:30 weren't doing anything in the office. So what's the point?
Okay, great. Well, it looks like that is the end of the questions. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. And thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Nuno, for that entertaining talk.